All right, so let's get started talking about chapter 12. I think I said chapter 11. It's chapter 12, which is career. You can find it on page 104 of my book, the Infj User Guide. If you don't have a copy yet, you can find it on Amazon. That's where you can get the paperback version, and there's also a version for Kindle as well. And if you do buy my book on Amazon, please go leave me a review. I would appreciate it so very, very much. It helps other people to be able to see the book too. Okay, so careers for INFJs is a big thing for us. A lot of us tie our careers to our purpose, and so we put a lot of effort into finding the quote-unquote right career. We feel like we need something that has a lot of meaning and a lot of depth. We want to do something that helps people. We feel like we have a higher calling and this huge purpose. Especially when you're young, it's a big thing because you just don't know what to do. It was terrible for me when I was in high school. I didn't want to graduate from high school because I didn't know what to do. And I hated that question people always ask, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know. And in college, it was difficult for me to pick a major too, because it was like, I don't know. I think that I know, but then that didn't work out what I thought that I knew. I thought that I wanted to be an engineer, and I was so committed to the idea of being an engineer for a few years. And then I decided that I didn't want to be an engineer, and it was horrifying to go and tell everybody that I wasn't going to be an engineer. It was like I had all of these expectations that they had expectations, and what really, it was more of like my fear of being a failure than it was any expectations that my friends or my family had for me. So I think it helps to start. Last week we talked about finding your purpose, and it always helps when you're talking about a career to start with your purpose, right? It helps to know what your core values are. It helps to know how you can help people when you're talking about your career. Now, I want to be clear too that your purpose isn't always tied to your career, but a lot of the times it is. One of the main things when I found out my personality type, I went looking for like, okay, what do INFJs do for a living? Like there has to be like one thing that we all do, right? Because we're all the same. And so there are a lot of these lists of like common careers. And I included one of those lists in my book because a lot of people ask me that. But I think it's a little bit misleading. I think that when you make a list and say, this is what INFJs do, that you kind of paint us into a box. Of course, it's natural for us to be counselors because we're so good at it. And that would include being like a psychologist or a regular counselor, a social worker, a sociologist, a teacher. You can be a counselor in a school. It's a lot of us are writers. That comes pretty natural to a lot of us. That doesn't mean that all of us are, but a lot of us are. Some of us express ourselves through art. And that can be being a traditional artist or being like a graphic designer. And because we have such a good and big caring side to us, a lot of us end up in healthcare. And then some of us end up as entrepreneurs or business owners. But I think it's important to be clear that you don't have to be a counselor if you're an INFJ, and you don't have to be a writer. You can really be anything that you want to be. I don't think that marketing is usually on those lists of what INFJs typically do, and that's what I do for a living. I've worked in marketing for about 10 years. Thankfully, the majority of what I do now is digital marketing, so it's like email and social media and building websites. And that's a lot easier for me, a lot less stressful for me than what I used to do, which was give sales presentations in front of important people for big companies and take people around at events and like lead big events. I've been involved in events that were 25 people and some that were 700 people. And believe me, writing emails all day long is a whole lot easier for me, a whole lot more natural for me than standing up in front of 700 people and talking. But my career has kind of like evolved because my day job is in marketing, but I'm also a business owner, and right now I'm doing, a live video on Instagram. I do videos all the time. I do workshops, I do courses. I have a podcast that I do every single week. And somebody recently was like attacking me, saying, you can't be an INFJ because you do live videos. And obviously you're an extrovert because you do live videos. And I thought it was so funny because I'm like, if you knew me at all, you would know that I'm not an extrovert in any sense of the word. You can be an introvert and do videos. It's not like I'm standing in front of a bunch of people doing videos. I'm sitting at home and I'm the only person here. But even at that, you can stand in front of 700 people or 7,000 people and talk to them for 20 minutes or an hour, and you could still be an introvert. Introverts do that. A lot of really good speakers are introverts. There are a lot of CEOs of massive companies that are introverts. Think about Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. I don't think anybody has pegged those guys as extroverts. So just because there are certain parts of your job like that, or like doing live videos, that doesn't mean because you're an introvert, that shouldn't hold you back from doing those things. It might take you a lot of practice to get good at them. I'm sure if you go back and watch some of my earlier videos, they're not that great. My earlier podcasts aren't really that good either. But just because you're introverted doesn't mean that you can't do those. You can certainly learn how to do anything that you want to do. I know that there are a lot of musicians as well that are introverted. And they stand, they are on stage for a couple of hours, sometimes for months at a time. But they love the work that they do. And so they can get past the fear of being seen, and they can get past the, really, that's what it is. Basically, it's fear. And when it comes down to it, you have two choices. You can say, I'm introverted. I am afraid to be in front of people. I don't want to do that. And you can let that hold you back. Or you can say, I'm an introvert and it doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want to do. And you can learn how to talk in front of people. You could learn how to sing in front of people. Whatever it is that you want to do, you can do that. Obviously, depending on the type of career that you pick, there are different challenges. It'll definitely be a lot more in your comfort zone if you are a website builder, and you sit in an office all day long and you maybe have 5 or 6 people that you interact with. Maybe you work from home and you can interact with all of them on like a chat feature. You don't even have to talk to them. That would be a whole lot different than if you were a public speaker, if you were like a self-help coach. Think about like Mel Robbins or Glennon Doyle or Kathy Heller, all these people that I absolutely adore. I don't think that Kathy or Mel are introverts, and I'm not certain about Glennon, but I feel like they have very, very fulfilling careers. And they talk about how they're helping people and they're living their purpose and they know that they were called to do what they're doing. I'm sure that there are website developers who feel that way too, but the majority of them that I know feel like they're stuck in dead-end jobs. Like, they're not helping people. Building a website can help somebody, but it's not a part of, it's not going to help you be a better person. It's not going to help you be happier. It's not going to help you be more fulfilled in your life. I feel that way about marketing. You know, I work for a technology company, and to me, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't change lives, what the work that I do, right? Some people are going to buy software, some people aren't. It's like, it's not that great. It's not that big of a thing, right? If a customer calls me, I can be nice to them. You know, I can provide good customer support. I can do the job that I'm supposed to do. But it's not earth-shattering, you know? Whereas when I talk to people on my Instagram account, when I do coaching for INFJs, when I record my podcast and I talk about finding your purpose or understanding self-love, I feel like that is earth-shattering because I know that that has changed my life so much that I want to tell people about that. I want them to have the same sort of transformation that I had. I know that that can help you go from being sad and lonely and depressed and unsure of why you're even alive to being happy and being excited and being driven and having something that you wake up every single morning being excited to do. I've never felt that in a traditional job. I've always felt like it didn't matter whether I was there or whether somebody else was there. I worked at Walmart for 4 years when I was in college. And I guarantee you that it did not matter whether I was there or somebody else was there. I wasn't changing lives being there. Now, because I paid attention to people and because I cared about people, I did my job a little bit differently than other people did. I remember this one customer, I was a cashier, and so she came through my line and she was so mad, and you could just tell that she was mad, and she was like, I'm never coming to Walmart again, and just carrying on, and I'm like, what's going on? And she kind of stopped and looked at me, and she's like telling me the story about how it's her son's birthday party, and she's been like, she ordered a cake from the bakery, and she's been to the store 3 times, and it's still not done, and it was supposed to be done, and I was like, wow, I'm really sorry to hear that. Did you talk to the manager? And she's like, no, nobody ever offered to call a manager for me. And I'm like, well, if you have a minute, it might take them a minute to get up here, but if you have a minute, I'll call a manager and you can talk to them. And she was like, oh, okay, well, yes, please do that. And so I called the manager, and she waited for a few minutes, and they came to talk to her. And then she came back over to me and she said, thank you. And I said, yeah, of course. I'm like, did they help you? Like, were they able to get your cake? And she said, no, but they did give me 50% off of it, which, you know, doesn't save her a trip to Walmart, but it did something, right? And I think about all of the times that I've been in a store like that, not just Walmart, it could be in any store. You think about all of the times like that, and nobody pays attention. Nobody really even cares. But I think a lot of that, I mean, it goes both ways. It's like you're in one of those jobs and it's like, it doesn't matter, you know? And the customers come in and they're angry, and it's like, doesn't matter. Paying attention makes a huge difference, though. So as far as our careers go, it's important for us to have meaning, right? We need to feel like we're doing something that helps people. We need to feel like we're making a difference. I feel like a lot of us work for nonprofit organizations because sometimes the meaning can come from working for a nonprofit. And I've worked for a couple of nonprofits, and I know that in that space, people have a different attitude about their jobs. The majority of the people who work there feel like they're there for a reason, and the work that they're doing is incredibly important, and they're very passionate about the work that they do. So it's a different thing working for those types of companies. You can't get away with the same type of attitude of doesn't really matter, because to most people who work there, it does matter. That's one way that you can find meaning in your work. And that's another reason why INFJs tend to go to careers like counselors or psychologists, doctors, and a lot of us end up as some type of life coach or spiritual guide, because we just feel like that makes a huge difference. Something else that a lot of people don't highlight that I think is important is creativity. We get bored pretty easily. We like to do new things, and we're usually pretty creative. So, and being creative through some type of art, whether it's traditional art or even things like graphic design, it's a way that we can express ourselves and a way that we can share our feelings without actually having to talk about our feelings. And also it's important because we're really good at seeing the bigger picture, and we're really good at being able to solve problems. So sometimes creativity comes in not just for like making things beautiful, but also for making things functional. One of my biggest assets, and also one of my biggest weaknesses sometimes, is walking into a new situation and seeing all of the things that could work better. And I've worked in enough jobs to know that people will tell you when you're applying for a job and interviewing for a job, they'll say, we want somebody to come in and fix everything. And then you get hired and you walk in and you're like, okay, here's all the things that you can fix. And they're like, oh, no, don't do that. Don't say that we need to fix things. Like, what's wrong with you that you would say that? So they'll tell you that they want to fix things, but they generally don't want to fix things. Which leads us to the next thing, which is independence and flexibility. It's really hard for us to survive in corporate jobs, especially the ones with the cubicle and the follow the leader type of mentality. One of the hardest things for me to deal with is we've just always done it that way. We do it that way because we've just always done it that way, and we don't want to do it any different way. So many companies have things like that are backwards and upside down and could be faster and cheaper and more efficient if they would just change something. And they don't want to change it because they've always done it the hard way, and why would they change it? And a lot of times it's kind of like, you know, like what I just said about they tell you that they want to change and then they really don't want to change. One of the big things, because I work in marketing, I handle a lot of social media, and I have for a lot of companies, including a marketing company where I sold them on the idea that they needed to use social media and set up all of their social media accounts. And it's happened in every company that I've ever worked for. They use social media, and they have this arbitrary set of rules for their social media that somebody who doesn't use social media and who has never used social media set up. And they're like, you have to abide by these rules. And you look at the rules and they're like, you can't post pictures, but you have to post on Instagram 3 times a day. And I'm like, how do you post on Instagram without posting pictures? That doesn't work. What are you talking about? But I mean, there are rules that are made by people who don't use social media and who don't know what Instagram is. So, but they make these rules, and it's like, you have to abide by these rules. And so then you try to abide by their rules, and they're like, well, why isn't our social media growing? And it's like, well, because you've made these stupid rules. That's why. When I started this Instagram account, INFJ Woman, I was kind of like shocked and surprised that I hadn't thought about starting an Instagram account before I did. Because I've been on Instagram since 2011, and I've managed all of these accounts for all these companies, but I never had my own account that was like a public, almost business type of account. But when I did start my account, I was like, oh, this is super cool. Like, I can do all of those things that I've been telling all of these companies that I worked for that they need to do. I can try all these things. I can test out different things. I can see what works and what doesn't. I can keep up with all the trends, and I don't have anybody imposing a bunch of weird rules on me. And having that flexibility and that independence to just do whatever it was that I thought I should do. I mean, I've never had an account that's had 60,000 followers on it before. And I feel like that was a big part of it, especially in the beginning, because I posted 5 or 6 times a day sometimes. And all the business accounts that I've had, they never would let me post that much. They didn't have enough content, and they wouldn't provide a budget to have that much content. So I think, having independence to be able to make your own decisions and to organize stuff the way that you want to is a big thing for us. It's really, really hard for INFJs to follow rules that are just like, well, it's that way because I said it's that way, right? We like to have a good reason. We like to have a logical reason why the rules are the way that they are. I think it helps a lot for us to have variety in our jobs too. If you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, it gets really boring very quickly. I had a job when I was in high school where I worked for a company that printed small books, and it was kind of a low budget company. So we were putting the books together by hand, and it was like all day long you were basically just collating papers. And in the beginning it was fine, because it was doing something new and it seemed fun to learn a new thing. But then after a while, it's like, I can't do this all day long. I have to do something else. I have to be able to think about something. I've always worked in every single job that I've been in. I've worked for a lot of small companies, but I've always had to do multiple jobs. So even though I work in marketing, I also do graphic design because I worked for a company who needed a graphic designer, and I was like, okay, I'll learn how to do that. And so basically I learned how to do graphic design off of YouTube. And then I worked for a company who needed a new website, but they didn't have enough money to build one. So I was like, okay, I'll learn how to build websites. And I also learned how to do event planning and be an executive assistant and a PR manager and, a lot of different roles like that are similar to marketing, but not quite the same. I learned it because, I needed to. But it was also fun for me. Those are the types of opportunities where I'll be like raising my hand going, yeah, I'll do that. The company that I work for now needed a new website. And of course they didn't want to pay for it. But I was able to build them an amazing website in just about a year. And it has like 75 pages on it or something crazy like that. So it was a huge project, And I still had all of the other stuff that I do every single week to do, and then taking on that project on top of it. But it was fun for me because it was something that I don't typically do, and it's challenging. So I like doing that kind of stuff. Another thing to consider when you're talking about a career is your work environment. You have to think about what type of environment do you want to work in. A lot of corporate jobs are like cubicles, and it's not really a lot of fun working in a cubicle all day long. A lot of times you're not close to a window or you can't see the window. And when you're working in a cubicle, there's a lot of noise. There are people walking around, chit-chatting, some people screaming on their phones. You never know what you're gonna get, but it's not really an environment that INFJs thrive in, because we don't like all the people, we don't like all the distraction, and it's nice to be able to see something other than just these gray or beige colored walls. Another thing that's really, really horrifying, and I hope that people are getting away from this. I think that some companies have learned their lesson. Is there were a lot of companies, especially in marketing and graphic design, that had open office floor plans. So they don't have cubicles, they just have a bunch of desks with computers on them. And I've interviewed for a couple of those companies, and they always tell me like, oh, it's so great. Like there's music playing and people can just talk to each other all day long. And so you can work on your projects and it's just so awesome. And I'm like, no, that literally sounds like hell. Like there's music and people talking, which means it's extremely loud in there all of the time. So how can you focus on anything? And if you're trying to like write something or concentrate on something, how do you think? How do you even get your thoughts together? I wouldn't be able to do that. So every time I interview for one of those companies and they're like, oh, we have this open office floor plan and it's so great, I'm always like, no, thank you, pass. When you're looking for a career, I really encourage you to look outside of the box, to think about something other than a traditional career. I think it's a lot more acceptable and a lot more normal nowadays to be an entrepreneur, because it's so easy nowadays to start a blog and to learn how to make money from blogging, or to start a YouTube channel and make money from that. There's so many different ways that you can start your own business that really doesn't have a lot of startup costs, but has a huge potential to make a lot of money. When I was in college, I never would have thought that I could own my own business just by writing a blog. I thought it was something that people did for fun. I didn't think that it was that you could make money doing that. Like we were talking about earlier, just because you're an introvert, that doesn't mean that you can't do live videos on Instagram. It doesn't mean that you can't you can't teach courses. You can't teach people how to do things. There are a lot of INFJs who do that kind of thing. And it's a great way to incorporate your purpose and to do the things that you like to do, and to avoid the things that you don't want to do. Plus, you get all of the freedom and the flexibility to make your own rules, and you don't have to abide by somebody else's rules just because they own the business. You don't have to do things a way that other people have done, even though it's not efficient, just because they said so. You can make your own rules and do things the way that you want to. It's so much better than any traditional career, for sure. All right, so that's chapter 12. We only have one more chapter next week. So yeah, I guess that's it. I guess I did see a question. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I think it said what's the difference between an INFJ and an INFP. It was like, maybe it disappeared. Anyway, if anybody else has any questions, send them my way. The main difference between an INFJ and an INFP is the last letter. INFJs are organized. We like things planned. Even if we're not necessarily like planning every single minute of our day, but we want something to look forward to and we want to kind of know what's going on. So we're more clean and put together. And we like to know like what's coming. INFPs are more go with the flow. They're more spontaneous, more we'll just figure it out when we get there. And they can be a little bit more messy as well. All right. So one more time, I want to remind you guys that I started an insiders group on Facebook, which has extra videos every single week, a couple of live videos every single month. So make sure that you go check it out. You can find all the information at infjwoman.com/insider. And yeah, one more video next week. So for our book club, at least. So I will see you guys again next week. I hope you have a good weekend. So you just watched that video and I'm sure you enjoyed it. If you want some more amazing information about INFJs, check out these videos right now. I'll see you there.